game theory, game. Okay, rise. Okay. In the beginning, you as a people need to come together and build a land in which you can all prosper, or at least have food to eat, okay? Therefore, the game is cooperation. And the mechanism of cooperation is actually religion. So in this first game, okay, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a dynamic religion that motivates people to be energetic, to give them reason to work really hard. Okay? And the people who are best able to articulate this religion become the elite. Okay? And this includes poets and priests. All right? Poets and priests. And at this point in history, it's basically a startup. Okay? Everyone's enthusiastic, everyone's working hard, everyone feels as though they're making a positive contribution to the world. But over time, what happens is that the elite, okay, become hereditary. The game becomes, how do I, the elite, pass on my privileges to my children? Okay? And the way they do that is by changing the religion. Okay? The religion now becomes almost like a bureaucracy. So in the first game, the religion is about energy. It's about creativity. It's about working together. Okay? But in the second iteration, the religion becomes like a bureaucracy, which is like you must follow the rules of the game. Okay? The rules of the game are set. There's a hierarchy, and you must obey this hierarchy. Okay? Now then what happens is a process called elite overproduction. Okay? The idea of elite overproduction is that, yes, these privileges are being passed on to the children, but now over time, there are too many children. And so what happens is that society breaks up into different factions. Okay? And usually what happens is that these factions are divided according to the princes. Okay? So if there are 4 princes, okay, who are about to inherit the throne, there are 4 different factions that support them. That does not mean the prince is the leader of the faction. It just means that the prince is the symbol of the faction, okay? All right? And at this time in history, the way that they reduce the conflict is the losing factions, what they do is they move away, okay? They're exile, okay? And then they have to set up a new colony. And this is a process that continues where the losers of the game are forced into exile until there's no more place to colonize, okay? And now you have the Warring States period, okay? The Warring States period. And in fact, what's interesting is that the Warring States period is a time of maximum creativity for a civilization. Why? Because the idea of open, cooperative competition. Okay? So back to the Qing, back to the Greeks, the Sumerians, there are different colonies, okay? And they're all competing against each other. And so you need to be open and innovative if you're to triumph, okay? At the same time, they're trading with each other, so they're sharing best practices. They're sharing innovations with each other. Okay, so this leads to the idea of open competition, which again marks the height of the civilization. So guess what, guys? China's been around for 5,000 years, but most of the innovations happened when? It happened during the Warring States period. This 100 years when we had Kongzi, Confucius, Mengzi, Laozi, Zhuangzi. It's basically everyone, okay? All right? And if you just look at other civilizations, it's the same for other civilizations as well, where if you look at the Greeks, during the classical period, they basically created everything. That becomes the foundation for Western civilization, okay? Does that make sense? All right. Now, what's interesting is what happens next. Eventually, what happens is these city-states figure out that, you know what? yes, the game is we compete against each other, but we can also choose to work together, okay? How do you work together? By intermarriage, okay? Intermarriage. And the idea of intermarriage creates the idea of equilibrium. And at this point in history, warfare becomes organized warfare. Okay? So remember, before, warfare was about innovation. But now, when these elites from different city-states, when they intermarry with each other, okay, they have a new equilibrium. So they are above the state now. Okay? Does it make sense, guys? All right? So now when they fight, it's not really about fighting each other. It's about reducing their population to maintain control. Okay? It's a way to resolve the elite overproduction issue. We have too many people striving for too many status positions. And the way you do that is through population control. Okay? So warfare becomes a mechanism of population control. All right? So even though these city-states are still, in theory, competing against each other, they essentially now have reached an equilibrium. An equilibrium, another word for equilibrium is basically the idea of empire. Okay? All right? So now the game changes. Before, during the War of States period, it was a game to see which state would be the best, the most innovative. And that's why you invite people who could contribute the most to your city-state. Okay? That's why you were meritocracy. You only promoted the best and the brightest. But once you reach an equilibrium, you don't have to do that. Okay? All you have to do is just maintain the status quo. And so what happens is you create this rigid hierarchy, and what matters is who reaches the top of this hierarchy. And as a result, you create court politics, right? Court politics. Or factional struggle, factions. Okay? Does it make sense, guys? All right. So if you look at any court politics, the faction that triumphs is the one that's able to solve three problems. Okay? Three problems. These three problems are secrecy, trust, and coordination. Remember, in theory, everyone has to obey the bureaucracy, right? But if you just play by the rules of the game, you're going to lose. So what you want to do is you want to cheat in the game. But if you want to cheat in the game, you have to do so secretly, okay? You have to do secretly. But if you do so secretly, that creates a problem of like, how do you trust each other? If you're doing it all in secret, the problem is like, how do you coordinate? How do you move together, right? Because you can't have meetings where you take notes, because if you're discovered, you'll all be executed by the other factions, okay? So historically, the way we resolve this issue is through the idea of secret societies. Okay? So let's figure out how secret societies work. And this is true for China, this is true for the Greeks, this is true for the Aztecs, this is true for everyone, okay? But like there's certain aspects of secret societies. Okay? The first is the idea of secrecy. Okay? How do you do that? Well, you do that through the idea of a hierarchy. Okay? Hierarchy. Or compartmentalization. And so there are different, so within secret societies, there's a hierarchy as well, where only the people at the very top know what's going on. And if you want to join, you're initiated, but you have to put it at the bottom, okay? And slowly, you climb the ladder, okay? And this is to maintain secrecy. Trust. How do you get people to trust each other? Well, you get people to trust each other through the idea of transgression. Okay? So, if we cheat on a test together, we are much more likely to trust each other. Does that make sense? Because if you're caught, you all get punished, okay? So by bringing the law together, we can trust each other, okay? And the most basic type of transgression is the idea of ritual sacrifice. Okay? And the idea of ritual sacrifice is you basically decide to go kill someone together. Okay? You capture that person, then through some ritual, you then kill that person. Okay? Does that make sense? And then to solve the problem of coordination, you have the idea of eschatology. Eschatology is just mythology. All right? Like, why are you guys doing what you're doing? Okay? And the answer often is because we're trying to serve a higher God that wants to conquer the world, and we are his servants in this quest to conquer the world and end the world to make it a paradise. Okay? So different societies have different eschatologies, but the system is the same. Okay? Does it make sense? Okay. And what happens is, and this is like really important, guys, every faction has to form their own secret society. And now the game of empire becomes one of a struggle between different secret societies. Does that make sense? Meaning what? Meaning you don't care what happens to the empire. You don't care about the enemies of the empire. All you care about that your team emerges on top of the game. Okay? And so what does that mean? It means that you become, insular. All right? Okay? You become insular. You also become corrupt. Okay? Because you need resources to play this game, so what you do is you steal from the people. Okay? It's all about trying to steal as much as you can in order to feed your faction. You become insular, you become corrupt, okay? And then divided. Okay, do you understand? This is what happens because of different factions within the empire or the equilibrium. They become insular, they become corrupt, and they become divided, okay? Which is why they ultimately lose to these struggle factions, because the opposite of insular, of course, is open. The opposite of corrupt is energetic. And the opposite of divided is, of course, cohesive. Cohesion, okay? Okay? Now we understand why, ultimately, the borderlands, the tribes in borderlands, are able to conquer the empire or the equilibrium, okay? Does that make sense, guys? All right? But there's actually more to this, okay? And so what happens is that you have these different factions, okay? Different secret societies fighting against each other. And again, from their perspective, all they care about is winning against the other factions. So what do? What they do is they invite other foreigners to come help them. Okay, do you understand? Okay? So these are all called mercenaries. All right? And these mercenaries come into them, and their leadership is absorbed into the secret societies through eschatology, through transgression, through hierarchy, okay? All right? So this is what happens. These mercenaries are actually invited in, okay? And but there's always contact, okay? Contact through trade, banditry, mercenary. Okay? Does that make sense? Because these people, these in the regions, they're so poor they'll do anything to survive. So they'll trade with you, but they'll also steal from you, and they'll also come and fight for you. Okay? What's important is that through trade, they're becoming wealthier. Through banditry, they're becoming wealthier as well. And by working as your mercenaries, they are learning your best technology, your best fighting skills, your best weapons. Okay? Right? And then what happens is that the mercenaries eventually take over. Okay? At first they merge, but then the mercenaries just kill everyone and then take over. And that's what happens. That's why the Qing were able to conquer the warring states. Okay? They don't teach you this in history class, but according to game theory, what happened was that different factions of these different states actually invited the Qing to help them in their political struggle. And then the change is basically conquered one by one by one. Does that make sense?